the dream state has a much akin to the beautiful meditation that Sandra did, and to different states of mind that we enter when we're away from the everyday waking reality. Some of you who've studied brainwave patterns may have heard the words of alpha, beta, theta, and delta brainwaves, and they mix in different types of energies and types of amalgams to create the state of consciousness we're in. Have you ever driven for a while somewhere and then wondered how you ever got there? Felt as if you were in a time lag? And I don't mean, putting yourself in danger from that type of altered state. But if you've had that happen, that is akin to maybe a dream. On the way here, I was speaking with the Sunflower Man back there in the yellow shirt, and we had asked if he had remembered any dreams, and he told me about a dream he had had of some friends he knew in Georgia retiring, and that's the type of dream that could be a precognitive dream. They might be really retiring. How many of you have had a dream of something that came true like that? Even just a little message like that? Quite a few. That is one of the dreams, the precognitive dream. We dream of something and then it's actually there. Sometimes there's a famous reference to a precognitive dream. Some years back, there was a dreamer who kept trying to call different radio and television stations to warn everyone not to get on a certain airplane flight. And they thought he was a complete crackpot. And then I think it was in Los Angeles, the airplane did crash. So, it's just, there can be some very dire warnings. I think we have free will within limits. And it's a good idea to remember your dreams, to start a dream journal. You might be just shocked 2 or 3 months later if you go back and look at the dreams that you've dreamt. So dreams are a guide to inner space, which many people feel is greater or as great as outer space. Freud and Jung are two scientists of recent years who did a great deal of study of the dream state and how it affects brainwave activity. The type of measurement that's been done in measuring the dream state in dream laboratories is akin to some of the different scientific studies that have been involved with, if you've heard of J.B. Rhine and his wife and the studies they did in the University of North Carolina some years back of people who exhibited psychic ability and how their brain waves are a little bit different than the brain waves of many or the brain waves of anyone in the waking state. Some of you are nodding because you know what we're like here, right? But at any rate, there is definitely something that happens when we go through different dream states. And I have a list of the different types of dreams because there are so many, I couldn't even remember all of them. First of all, sometimes there's a dream that's a cleansing dream. It's like your mind is a blackboard that has to wipe itself clean. For example, if you've had a bad day at work and you dream of monsters, that can be your brain's way of cleansing the experience of the trauma. And then there's the preparatory dream where you prepare for something that really comes up. That's a little bit different than the real precognitive dream. But suppose you're planning a vacation and you might find yourself dreaming of maps or places on the vacation ahead of time, or maybe a move from one apartment to another. That can be a type of preparatory dream. And then we've mentioned the genuine precognitive dream. And then there is the spirit visitation. I mentioned that yesterday in talking about rescue mediumship. And that's where you dream of a loved one, but it's a real visitation. You feel that entity is really there. And if you try to tell everyone that, they'll say, well, you just dreamt of grandma. She's long in heaven. And maybe she is. But on the other hand, there's a real difference in the visitation dream. And dreaming of grandmother in heaven might be a cleansing dream to help you to deal with grief. And then there's the lucid dream. This is somewhat akin to mediumship, where you're half awake and half asleep. And when I teach mediumship development, which I have in different places, I'll suggest using the television as you're half falling asleep at night. I know a lot of the other teachers disagree with me on that. But if you're half awake, half asleep, have you ever fallen asleep in front of the television in kind of a different state? That can be a type of lucid dream. Then there's the repeating dream, where you repeat over and over again that maybe you have fallen off of a pier trying to learn to swim, or if you've gotten lost trying to get out of a house. One of Stephen King's novels has that type of repeating dream, where someone keeps dreaming of trying to escape from a house and can't. That's just one example of a repeating dream. And then this is very interesting. There's the shared dream, which is a type of psychic dream, where you might share a dream with somebody else and then talk about your dream the next day and find you both had the same dream. Has anyone had that happen? I have. Someone else has too. I've had that happen with my cat, Templeton. He likes to sleep with his body draped over my head, and I had a dream of him as a ruthless killer. He was murdering something, and he's actually the sweetest, most mild little cat, but in his heart he was a ruthless lion and a murderer. So if you love your animals and you sleep next to them, my sister used to sleep with her horse all of the time, and I don't know if they shared a dream or not. Or your dogs. A lot of people sleep with dogs. You might have a shared dream with your dog. And then there are nightmares that are just terrifying, and there are different things that we can do if the nightmares seem to have no reason, but yet we're terrified of them. Dream catchers, if you've heard of them, they're a Native American item that kind of looks like a spider web that you hang over your bed to catch the bad dreams before they hit your head. And they often do work, especially with children. And then also, many times in a very religious home, you'll see a crucifix over the bed. Has anyone seen that? Or if you've gone to a religious retreat house, over the beds, the different cells. I have to admit, I've been to one once, and they will have a crucifix over the bed to protect you in your sleep. And you might say a prayer like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, bless the bed that I lay on, calling on the Gospels, or the 4 archangels, depending. And then night prayers we say at night, now I lay me down to sleep. And if you really take a look at some of the wording of the prayers, you'll realize it's an invocation to protect you from all sorts of things that could be happening and going on while you're asleep, maybe on this plane and maybe on another one. And then there are dream indicators in the horoscope. And I hope to teach a class about those in the astrology of dreams here later on in the year. But for those of you who can't make the class, look at the planet Neptune in your birth chart and the moon in order to get an idea of what astrology might have to say about dreams. Edgar Cayce is probably the most famous dreamer, the sleeping prophet. He would go into a kind of a trance state, and that's what we do in trance mediumship. I do a traditional Victorian seance where the medium actually goes into a trance, and it's like being a profound somnambulist. If you've taken any classes in hypnosis, your goal is to become a somnambulist. And a profound somnambulist is someone who's really very close to being asleep. And that's similar to the trance that Cayce would have. And we really usually don't remember very much, if anything, of that. Cayce remembered very little of his dreams. Albert Einstein and Thomas Edison were both other famous dreamers. and their horoscopes are interesting to look at. J.K. Rowling, who wrote, of course, the Harry Potter novels. Does everyone else love Harry Potter? Wonderful books. Well, she was in a daydream state on a train going down to Exeter, which is a college in England, if they won't let you into Oxford or Cambridge. I love this story. Neither one of the big schools will let J.K. in. So she was on the train on her way down to the third-rate school, you know, like the old community colleges used to be accused of being. And Harry Potter came running up the aisle and gave her all the books which she wrote. And she became the richest woman in England after the Queen. Don't you love that? Now won't you all listen to your dreams from now on? Who knows what they might tell the rest of us. So this is a little excerpt from one of my books about the world of dreams, Your Guide to Inner Space. We've all wandered there. The bizarre and mysterious world of dreams has tantalized and mystified people for thousands of years. References to messages received in dreams are found in early religious texts, as well as poems and stories. The hieroglyphics of the ancient Egyptians contain accounts of dreams when they're translated correctly. Dreams are a key to your inner universe, which we access whenever we sleep and where we spend about a third of our lives. If you think you don't remember your dreams, you will now that we're talking about it a little bit, probably. And there are some things you can do to stimulate dream recalls. You can make a dream pillow, which is just a bit of cloth gathered into a sachet with certain herbs. And I have a recipe for that I'll be giving out in my class later. But if you can get some mugwort herb, that's an easy herb to find, with a little bit of lavender. Both of those are easy to find, and about equal parts of mugwort with lavender, just tied into a sachet. You can have your very own dream pillow. You can also add a crystal to the pillow, the Herkimer diamond, which is a very, very bright, clear quartz found usually near Herkimer, New York. That is a wonderful, I think they probably have some at the bookstore among the crystals there. That's a very, very high grade of quartz that will stimulate wonderful dreams. Amethyst is also a very good crystal to put in your dream pillow. And so is a blue lace agate. So any of those. You can experiment with other crystals too, because crystals, of course, are raw computer memory. And the wonderful karaoke and everything that we see on the screen, all of that comes from crystals, computers. And you can take just a raw piece of crystal and put it into your pillow, and along with a few dream herbs, and do some wonderful things. Try keeping a notebook on your nightstand. You can use a tape recorder or your phone if you want to be more modern. And before you get up in the morning and start walking around to get your orange juice, or mimosa maybe, looking at some of you here, or your tea or coffee in the morning, before you start walking around, make just a sentence or two of that first aha moment when you wake up, and that'll stimulate more dream recollection. Another very famous dreamer, now get ready for this, I don't know if you'll believe me, King Henry VIII. When he was holding court and people would bring him questions and issues, and he just didn't know what to say at the moment, he said, "Let me dream on this and I'll tell you another time, another morning." So you can really sleep when people say they want to sleep on something. That can be a method of problem solving. And sometimes if you don't know what to do anymore, really literally doing that, sleeping on, should I move or should I spend a lot of money on an expensive dog I'd like to have instead of a rescue dog or whatever. Think about it, and an answer or feeling or an aha moment will probably come. You know, should I tell the neighbors they're no good or just let them go on as they are, or what should I do? And so usually you'll get the right answer there, and the more you do that, the more correct the dreams will be, and the more profound you'll know what to do in the world, because it's getting to be very, very difficult. You know, a lot of us don't know what to do about a lot of things anymore. And within us should be the answers. And then hopefully we can find peace and serenity, as was done in ancient times. If I were to tell you that one of the first books in the world, except for a Bible, was a dream book, how many of you would believe me? Nobody. Good, that's good. Well, I can tell you that, and you can look this up. In the 2nd century A.D., a writer named Artemidorus compiled the very first dream book. And he wrote, this was translated by somebody from the ancient Greeks, so we'll have to take his word for it. Dreams are infused into people for their advantage and instruction. In Eastern European mysticism, there's a lot of mysticism from old Russia, from the Harz Mountains in Germany, and that whole part of Eastern Europe has a lot of mystical qualities, and one of them is meeting your doppelganger. Doppelganger is a German word. It means body double, where you can encounter somebody. It isn't like it's the twin person that just looks like you, but it's actually a side of you. And we had an interesting lecture yesterday by Sydney about twin flames, where one of the theories of what a twin flame is, and there's several theories, is that it's actually two parts of the same person meeting up with each other. And I was sitting there during her lecture thinking, doppelganger, Sandy, should I stand up and interrupt your lecture? No, I'll keep my mouth shut and have a few friends. But at any rate, that was another idea where you can get sort of a new insight into dreams. The study of dreams is both practical and informative. It's very worthwhile. And of course, Freud and Jung started with early forms of therapy and using dreams and dream guidelines. Some guidelines to start to become involved with your dreams are to be aware of some important recurring themes. One of them is food. How many of you dream about food? Nobody? Someone does. Few of you do back there. That's a very important dream, and they relate to an appetite which you're seeking to have satisfied. It might not really be for watermelon, which is what I dream of, my favorite food, but at any rate, it could be another unfulfilled appetite that you have, so you want to analyze it. So food dreams can be a metaphor for wanting more money and power, and possibly even fulfillment and love. How about flying? How many of you have ever dreamt of flying? That's a very common dream theme, and a number of you have. Flight in dreams shows an urge to escape from something, and you want to get ahead on your spiritual quest to head up to a higher level. Prophetic and preparatory dreams we've talked about, and these describe real events and getting ready for the future. That's where keeping your dream journal can really be helpful. And in 3 or 4 months when you have forgotten the dreams, because most of the time you will, until you look at the notes you've made, you can get some really interesting insights. There's a saying, a dream uninterpreted is like a letter unread. There's a tremendous reservoir of comfort and healing that you can find in working with your dreams, and it can be a very valuable part of developing your mediumship and your overall spiritual path. And either the timing can be very important. If you really are a dream fanatic, we go through a time where we have different states of dreams. And if you set an alarm to wake you up in the middle of the night, that might be too painful. You might be awakened in the middle of a dream you would have forgotten. So if you really want to do serious dream work, you can experiment with figuring out when your circadian rhythms are telling you you're at your deepest sleep. It's most people that's around 4 in the morning, but that can vary. But if you set an alarm for slightly earlier than that, and then sit up and walk around a little, maybe sit out on the front porch a minute even, and then go back to sleep, you can remember more, or you might recall something then, especially if you're using the dream work for something that you really want to solve and really want to work with. And something else that you can do is to be aware of the timing. There's certain times when dream work can be at its peak. Of course, the full moon is extremely powerful, but so is the day of the new moon. The new moon and full moon, which you can find on any calendar, you don't need any fancy astrology books, are very good to be aware of. And then also important anniversaries, a loved one who's passed into the spirit world, or the birth date of that person can be extremely significant. For example, in our family, the number 13 is extremely important, and was when I was about to be born, after my parents had been married for 15 years and were actually shocked. They were sure I would come in on the summer solstice, and then my grandmother said, no, she's one of us, she'll come in on the 13th. Wait and see. And she was right. And so numbers can be important to you. If there's a number that turns up. How many of you have dreamt of a number, like 10? Some of you have. One of the neatest things about numbers involves, I know I'll have everyone's attention now, a lottery win. A lot of the dream books of today, and there are many of them, Artemidorus really had his thoughts together in the 2nd century. A lot of the dream books will have lucky numbers on them. And sometimes if you have a dream, say of a cat or a loaf of bread, and you can look it up in a dream book and you can find the number, you can use that in a way to have a lottery win. And I say take that as a game. You know, don't take all the money you have in your piggy bank and spend it all. Just buy one ticket. That's all you need to win and just to see. But there was a famous story that was in the Miami Herald a lot of a lady. She happened to be Latin American. I don't know if that makes a difference or not. She passed away, and she was coming to her father in dreams. And she wasn't not a child. She was like, I think in her 20s or so, but she died of natural causes. And she came to her father with a bunch of animals in a dream. He looked them up in a dream book, and he won the big one. He won a major lottery win. So, you know, there are very practical purposes for using dream work. Being near the ocean, near the waterfront, sailing, being on a cruise, seems to stimulate dream recollection. How many of you have had a dream if you've been fortunate enough to go on a cruise? Or if you've come home after a day of boating and still feel sort of the waves a bit? And a lot of people, that does stimulate dreams. I traveled to Egypt with the Edgar Cayce Foundation some years back. And one of the neat things that they did was to arrange a cruise on the River Nile for us. And I and others had some very major dreams the day we arrived back from the cruise on the Nile in Heliopolis, the main city. I was trying to think of it. Heliopolis, city of the sun. So it's just interesting to see what in your own world might stimulate dreams. I have found that the anniversary of someone's birth in this incarnation seems to be a more vivid way of communication with those in the spirit world than the day that they passed away or died. It seems as if there is a memory of that birth date that's with the spirit that you might have as a visitation with you. So those are some ideas. There's also the major holidays. We had Lammas, everyone was mentioning that. It's faded away now, but that's around August 1st, the midpoint between the summer solstice and the fall equinox. And then, of course, there's the fall equinox, Halloween, the winter solstice, Candlemas around February 2nd, and Beltane around May Day, May 1st, the spring equinox. All of those old agricultural holidays are very, very big with dreams. And so those are some ideas that I hope might be of interest and might help you. And also you can look at the moon sign transits for each day. If you're just a little bit more into astrology, I have a free program on Facebook almost every morning, and we'll tell you the moon sign of the day and phase. And then if you know a little bit about the traits of that sign, if it's important in your own birth chart, that can help you a lot in doing some significant dream work. So anyway, good night and sweet dreams. Those are things you can say to yourself or to your cat or to someone else this evening when you think of good night, sweet dreams. Those are ancient blessings to help you to have happy dreams. Okay? So sweet dreams.